I don't understand why you feel like you need to sleep on Gigi's bed. Why do you need to sleep on her bed? Why can't you get on your own? Get on your own. Hey, get on your own pillow. Why do you need? I like to come in here and say we're all in our right places, but this little dog is off the chain. It's yeah, he doesn't want to sleep on his own little mat that's down there. He wants to sleep on hers. And so then they look like they're struggling over this one space that's right next to me, a pillow. I don't know, maybe I'll have to pull out another drawer because they actually, my one dog that I've had all along, she sleeps, I pull out the bottom drawer of my desk and she makes her bed there, and that's where she sleeps. Well, since I got the second little dog, I don't know if it's just because she's there that he wants to be there, or what the deal is with that. But whatever the case may be, he's trying to the size of a pillow, of regular bed-sized pillow, he's trying to force his way up into her space. Whatever. Anyway, they'll kind of do what they do until they don't. So good morning to you. I am so wrinkled. Smooth that out a little bit. I'm so wrinkled. This morning while I was, normally I'll tell you, I'll ask spirit questions as I'm going along. And right down to sometimes the lipstick, which one should I choose? Which one? And so this morning, as I was getting dressed, there was a pull that drawer open kind of sensation that came over me. And I pulled the drawer open and I was like, nope, 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 nope. All of these were for warm weather, except for this one. And I haven't worn this shirt in a long while, but I actually really love the polka dots and the ruffles on the sleeve. I think that's why I bought it in the first place. And I very rarely, because it takes so much work to put it on, because I don't normally have to iron things, and I wasn't going to iron this either. So I figured I would just say up front that I'm a little wrinkled today. So whatever the case may be, I'm here, and I am so glad that you're here. And we get to take this little skip down the lane together. Now he's on my foot. I've got a footstool up under the desk that I usually have my feet on. And now he's nudging me to move my feet so he can sleep on my little pillow. It's all good. It's all good. So it is Tuesday, and happy Tuesday to you. I am so glad to be here to be sharing this space with you and these thoughts. It is interesting because I don't know about you, but a week ago, I think it was, that, as a matter of fact, let me put down that on my list of to do, is to respond to that email. About a week ago, I was told that there was a lot of planets that were, I don't want to call them misaligned. They are not necessarily misaligned, but when planets go into retrograde, it affects things. We hear often about Mercury going retrograde and how that upsets communication, but rarely do we hear about any of the other planets and what that may mean. Even if you think about Venus, the love planet, or Jupiter or something like that going retrograde, what types of things did those influence? So so I know that I was told that there is a lot of things that are going on in the cosmos. We also heard that there was an asteroid that was redirected, um, or yeah, I think it was redirected. And you wonder that when these, the shifts, the planetary shifts that happen, how those then affect us. We are, and as we move from one month, one zodiac sign into another, then what? What is at play? I love how Dr. Brown, for me, talks about the ages, and he talks about we are moving into this age of Aquarius and what that will mean as far as the feminine energy, because Aquarius is a feminine, a feminine sign. And so how will that then affect how we as women show up? And Iran just had this major upheaval because a woman was basically beaten and eventually died for wearing her hijab in the wrong way because it was showing part of her hair. And we come to realize that oppression, while we talk about the oppression here, and don't get me wrong, I talk about the oppression of people as Black folks, right? As African Americans, but the oppression of women is really real too. As a matter of fact, it's interesting because even as I study, and I love to study mythology, I love to study by the Bible. I love to study so many different things. And as I do so, it is this idea of paying attention to who gets pushed into the background, who gets relegated to second class citizenship, if you will. So all of these things, as we watch there being this shift, and don't get me wrong, I don't have the notion that God is sitting there saying my son and my daughter and all of this stuff, making the distinction, because God stands outside of the differences, right? The gender differences, the gender identity thing. I believe that it is beyond that in thought. We call God him, but I don't think that it is at all, when you think about the allness of what it is, it could not be exclusively masculine. However, it has been depicted as exclusively masculine, even in the aggression that was shown, especially in the Old Testament. And so they're becoming this more of a comforter, nurturer kind of imagery through the teachings of Christianity. And so there is this interplay between the two. And don't get me wrong, I like to make sure that I say to people when they start to question it, that it was Eve that gave birth to, I mean, not Eve, but Mary who gave birth to Jesus. And it did not, according to the biblical story that we were given, man, the intervention of man, the insemination by man was taken out of that equation. And we have to think about, if that's the case, why is that the case? Is it to make him seem more divine, to make him seem other than, when he was telling you and I that all the things that I do, you can do also, and greater than these, if you just understood about your place and how you are interconnected with this thing if you just get a grip on that. And so is it to take away all of that, the adversarial role or the masculinity that men have been portrayed as having? Is that, just kind of pondering the possibilities, which I always say is something that we haven't been encouraged to do, to just sit with ideas and explore them and ask ourselves the question, why would this be? So, I don't have all the answers to those things, but I do have a lot of questions, and I hope that the ability to sit with an idea is something that you embrace and that stays with you, because unless and until we remain in darkness, until we are able to bring and let there be light in our own consciousness, let there be light in our own thinking. I just think that is, to me, it's an amazing space to be in. So good morning to you, and yay, I am, I could party in that realm for a while, y'all. If you could see me, how I see myself as dancing around a campfire and tossing up, wine, and just having this just amazingly wonderful time in spirit, right? In spirit, just like letting it love on me. I think it's such a, I think it's an amazing place to be. And then you can have those moments of reflection after it's all said and done, after all the partying, then kind of dissecting, why was I there? What were we partying about? What was the celebration? What I just, I love that. I love that. And this morning I was writing about this idea of how often we want to put a period, a finality to things, where it should be an openness. I hate to should on people, right? But how do I remain open to the possibility? How do I not get stuck in between book covers, right? How do I not look at a book and think that, this is the back and this is the front, and that even when I know that there's a back and a front, a beginning and an end to it, that's not the entire story. And so what scares me a lot of times is that, we want to, go around and swing our Bibles in the air. I took all my, part of the class that I'm teaching is that she asked us to read a few different translations of the book. And so I have apparently taken all of my books into the kitchen where I study, at the kitchen table. But there is this thing of we want to say, like, in the beginning, and then not recognize that in the beginning could be, right? Could be not a beginning at all, but an enlightenment, an awareness. Like, I was in the dark, I was blind, but now I see. Sometimes we want to just truncate everything in life, when nothing in life is truncated, nothing. And so all we see is this ongoing story, and to find ourselves in place, right, on October of 2022, according to the calendar and clock that we use, we find ourselves in place But that doesn't mean that where the history books or where the Bible begins is where humanity began. I mean, I just to ponder that and to say when it's lights out for you or I that life will not go on, it will absolutely. Even when I was doing my work and my homework last night, even this idea the story about Noah's Ark reads that there was a flood that came over, and it was as if it flooded the entire world. But wonder if it only flooded like the entire Tigris Valley region. And because people had not been beyond a particular place, doesn't mean that it was every place. Like, was it in the Europes? Was it in the lower Africa? Was it in India? Was it in the United States? We don't, there's this idea that people, and we didn't have the internet, we didn't have live stream, we didn't have all of these things that help us to know what's going on in other parts or in other areas. So who are we? How do we suppose that the flood was like all over the world? I mean, these are just questions that we ponder. Hopefully we are open to pondering the questions, asking ourselves, is there another meaning behind all of this? So, when I come back to what I'm finishing up this book, It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolin. We are in I want to say the final chapter of this book. I think it is, because it's really only about it's not that many more pages. Yeah. Oh yeah, we are in the final chapter of this book and final pages of this book. And so yeah, and so after I finish this up, we will do some review, and then I will move on to something else. But yeah, this is, I'm really trying to share these final thoughts with you guys. So yesterday, as I ended the hour, I was saying that we should take a moment and feel the support of our ancestors, feel the support of those that came before us, and that they too have a vested interest in what happens to us. Like if I could just know that my greats, whether it was my great grandparents or my great great grandparents or whoever, that the lineage, the line of who they were continued into me. It may culminate in me because, of course, I did not give birth to any children. And so it's not the end of the bishop line, but it is certainly this is as far as I've gone. This is as far as my line goes. So there is this here, it ends with me, but of course I've got siblings that have children, and I've got, all of these other folks that are doing the job that I did not do. And to some degree, I know that is purposeful. All of it has a purpose and a reason behind it. So here we are. Yeah, here we are. And do I feel as if I have brought something to my lineage? Absolutely. Right. And if nothing else, I have opened up a conversation. My nephews, I think I told you guys back in the summer, I was talking to my nephews about sperm integrity is what I called it. sperm integrity, and was telling him about the impact of trauma and life choices and what those have upon their seed, their sperm, I should say, which will eventually perhaps fertilize someone's egg. And then all of the stuff that comes from their side of the family then becomes lived out through their offsprings. Man, and when you think about it, what's our responsibility? What is that responsibility? I'm going to read this quote one more time because I thought it was just so amazing, and then I'm going to move on from there. But when as you take a moment to feel this support that comes from our ancestors, I think that's a powerful thing. Thich Nhat Hanh, yesterday I shared this, and I meant to look this book up. It says, if you look deeply into the palm of your hand, you will see your parents and all the generations of your ancestors. Damn, in the palm of your hand. All of them are alive in this moment. Each is present in your body. You are the continuation of each of these people. Welcome. Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that. And there is this part in, I don't know. I think I talked about, oh no, that was not necessarily on this show, but we were talking about favorite movies or something like that. And one of the things that I said was that The Family Man was one of my movies that I really loved. It's a Christmas movie. And in this thing, there's this section where this little girl says to her supposed father, "Welcome to Earth." It was so cute. It was so cute. All right. So take a moment and feel the support. Send your breath into the places where you feel it, the support in your body. When it says send your breath into the places where you feel the support, when you breathe in, breath work is powerful, right? And so remember that sometimes we are taught to breathe into our belly into our belly, because a lot of times we breathe in our chest, but we're supposed to really breathe into our bellies. There are amazing nerve endings that have their origins in our gut region. So when people say, I feel it in my gut, sometimes we have butterflies when we're nervous or upset. It's a powerful region. And so breathing into that space and feeling your stomach expand is amazing. I mean, it's powerful. But there is also this ability that if, say, for instance, you feel supported in your stance, then what part of your body do you breathe into then? So as you take in the air, sometimes we can imagine it feeling our heads. Sometimes we can imagine it feeling our chest or our stomachs, or we can feel our breath go all the way down to our feet, right? You can breathe into the spaces in between spaces. You can breathe into any area. Just put your mind on it as you inhale and send that air to that space. If you're carrying stress in your back, if you're carrying it in your butt, if you're carrying it in whatever areas, when you breathe in, when you suck in that breath, imagine it going into those spaces, like just taking your breath, and if it is moving as a force or an energy, just moving into those spaces before it's called back to then go out. And imagine that breath is cleansing you, all right? Send your breath into the places where you feel support in your body. These new feelings live inside you and now require our care and attention in order to flourish. With each conscious breath, feel the calm and well-being that can spread in all directions, becoming a part of who you are. It's as if that breath is a wake-up call. It's a energizing, it's a tingling, it's a flow. It's saying, yeah, wake up. It's saying, you know, I'm here. It's a breath of fresh air that moves through your body. Each time you inhale, allow the good feelings to expand your body. Each time you exhale, allow any residue of fear to dissipate on your out breath. If you think about this breath as a healing entity, just allowing it to circulate in your shoulders and your hips and in your lungs and your stomach, of course, but even down that spinal column that is your back. And it's amazing when women are in childbirth, right? When they're going through, they learn about breathing and what is it called? Malage, samaj, momage, palage, passage. I don't know. but you know, all of the breath has been empowered and it's moving through. And as you pay attention to your breath, it takes your mind off of the pinpoint that you might be otherwise focused in on, and it expands it so that your whole body benefits. And I think that that is an amazing thing. So here he's saying core language medicine is the name of this chapter, and we are finishing and completing this book. But he says next steps, continue the transformation. He says with your core sentence and its source in conscious awareness, you can continue disentangling from the web of inherited fear. Disentangling from the web of inherited fear. Let me, what once functioned as an unconscious mantra, keeping you rooted in suffering, can now be a resource that sets you free. If you find old feelings returning, simply implement the following steps. Now, say your core sentence aloud or incant it silently to yourself. Let me go back to core sentence, because I want to make sure that you guys understand what the core sentence is. And one of the things that I have, oh goodness, one of the things that I have really gotten from this is the necessity to assess what it is that you are thinking about, right? So here we talked about epigenetics and how things live generation after generation in our bodies. And so if you think about this in a way that that says that, okay, I'm going to I'm going to now rid myself of these things that are influencing me, but they did not start with me. So if you think about it from that standpoint of view, what we are doing is we're looking at what may have impacted our parents. Like now I'm talking about my nephews. What has impacted their life that then they pass on to their children unintendedly, because a lot of times this is not an intentional act. Like here, I'm going to, I'm going I don't think that there is ever this active thing of saying, I'm going to curse you, right? Oh yeah, here, let me take a detour for a minute. Because through doing this work and learning about the impact of our families, our ancestral line over our current moment, we start to see these things in different things. Yesterday, I happened upon a story about this woman who killed a couple of her children. I forget what city she was in, but her name is Michelle Blair, I think it is. And she had these children and she ended up killing two of them and sticking them in a freezer where they remained until she was about to be evicted and somebody comes in the house and finds her two children. There is all of this anger that she felt and expressed, talking about her actions were totally justified based on what they had been doing. Now, it did not escape me that this woman, although she has, portrayed herself as being very competent and very sure of her actions. But if we look at her situation and think that it did not start with her, that this is something that probably more than likely was passed down to her from another generation. It is sometimes terrifying to think about the children that would be born to these people and the anger that they may carry in them unbeknownst to them. I have a friend who spent most of his adult life, I don't want to call him a friend. He was somebody I knew, a neighbor who spent most of his adult life in prison behind some bars. And when he came out the very first time. He found a woman and married her. And I don't think that she knew much about him when she married him. All that she knew was he was this guy and he had come out of, I don't even know if she knew he was in prison. But he bought up stuff. He had stuff. He looked like, a guy with some money. She married him and ended up having a child by him. Now, it's really ironic because one of the things that I know that they had a few years together before things started to spin out of control. They had a house built out in the suburbs and seemed to be living what on the surface appeared to be an idyllic life. But then all of a sudden, the things that got him into prison in the first place, that anger of his, got the best of him, and he wound up back in behind bars. Now, ironically, this is what I'm trying to say. Ironically, when I've seen him go into a rage, and from a distance, because he just was somebody that lived on my street. At a distance, there is no talking to him when he is enraged. It is as if something else takes over his body. And I doubt that he recognizes anybody when he is enraged. He originally went to prison for killing somebody. And, there was always this kind of, I don't want to like diminish it anyway, but this dance along the edge of the abyss that he would do. And he would end up back in and out of prison over a period of time. Well, one day I ran into the woman that he had married, didn't know her name, but right off. But I remember running into her, and say, for instance, I was at the bank. I go up to the bank window, and as I'm staring at her, it finally came to me where I knew her from. And I said, "Aren't you Earl's wife? Or weren't you Earl's wife?" And if you could have seen the shadow that came over her face, she shut down my transaction and moved away from where I was. And I would not have been surprised if she would have changed branches altogether, because her reaction to just my saying his name was as if she needed to flee the scene and never encounter anybody who knew her from that stage of her life again. Now, it was so her reaction threw me. It's as if she was in hiding. The other thing that used to get me was, even as a little child, her daughter, that when her daughter was 3 or 4, she had if people could talk about the look of what a psychopath or a sociopath would have, her look was just like that. There was no warmth in that child, in its face, in its eyes, nothing. It was just like you would get this glare, this uncomfortable feeling. I just wonder how those things play out. And you don't know. I mean, we can make assumptions. I can make assumptions about even the little kid. It could have just been the situation that she was in. There could have been a time when there was a softening or a change in her. Who knows? But at some point, I realized that this woman had gotten out of that marriage and was basically, trying to disengage herself from anything that had anything to do with that man. I know him to the extent of, I still know who he is. I know where he dwells now. I don't see that side of him, but of course I don't provoke that side in people. Now, there are some people that are easily provoked, and when you touch on whatever their trigger is, then that then starts to flare up. And so there are a lot of us, there are things that can trigger us into or that have triggered us, and we don't know where those things come from. Now, I am so thankful that I do not have the trauma in my ancestral line that we see in others. This woman, that Michelle Blair, who killed her own children for doing things that she thought justified that. because whether it was when she found out what was going on with her kids, whether she tried to justify it by saying that they were beating up on each other or torturing one another or whatever, she made it sound like her punishment of them was justified, was a justified response to what was happening in her home. When you think about your worst fears, when you think about the things that that you are that you feel within your being, asking yourself, where does that thought or where does that feeling come from? First, when you are developing your sentence, what we do in according to this is that we've got things that are unsolved in our past, and so it asks questions about your experiences that you may have had. So if you think about your core language, how to recognize your core language? He says an intense, urgent words that describe your deepest fear is usually where your core sentence, your core language is. You can also hear it as a complaint about a relationship, our health, our work, and other life situations, right? Sometimes it is, sometimes it is something that may seem disconnected from you. So he uses the story of Gavin I think in this chapter. And the language map, if you are mapping out your language, it is like finding out what your core words would be. So if I think we talked about at one point a unconscious memory that people would have that they play out in their lives. Sometimes it is the verbal cues that you might notice in your own consciousness. There is all kinds of stuff that we can pull out, and I need to go over this stuff so that I can pull it out and talk about it. Yeah, so I can talk about it more specifically with you. I'll do that tomorrow. So getting your core language, thinking about what words you use in order to describe the trauma that you have dealt with. So like the woman who said she'd be vaporized, or the woman that said her life would be ruined, or somebody else might have said, but it is a overreaction to a situation or a problem. It is a dramatization. What'll happen if you lose your home, right? People will talk about me. It's more about how other people will perceive you than what you feel about yourself. And so when you start to map out these languages, you go from where you may have listened and heard one thing to where you hear something else. I'll get back into that. I'll do a review sheet for myself so that I can talk to you more about that. But this is in an effort to get a core sentence out. So like when I did my core sentence, mine was about my life needing to matter. I was afraid that I would die without my life mattering. And so if that was my core sentence, and I started thinking about who in my family line might have experienced that type of feeling or that thought, I could trace that to a grandmother. I could trace it to a brother. I could trace it to different things in my life and think to myself, is this really mine? Just like the funeral I went to on Saturday, when they were saying this woman was on, in her 80s on her deathbed, talking about she didn't think that she had done quite enough yet, right? She didn't touch quite enough people yet. There was this feeling of always wanting to do more. Where does that core concept originate? How is that your fear? And how does that fear then play out in life experiences? Yours could be something totally different. Yours could be, who knows what. But it's not usually tied to so just really like investigating what your core thought, your core meant. So say your core sentence aloud or incant it silently to yourself. As you say it, allow the sensation of the old fear to arise just for a moment so that you can become familiar with the feeling. These sensations can be a signal that the switch of your core sentence has been turned on without your knowledge. So if every time I have a something that triggers in me that feeling of like needing to matter, what is that? Where do I feel it in my body? So say, for instance, if you were one, I used to be one that would get butterflies. I wonder what yours is, right? Do you get, sometimes we notice our jaw tightening. Sometimes we clench or tighten our butts. Sometimes we carry it in our shoulders and our shoulders scrunch up and get all tight. We see different people who carry their bodies in particular ways. And it seems to me to speak to a level of stress or a stress response when you see somebody that walks around and they're so tight and so constricted. It is as if that constriction is coming from somewhere. Get familiar with what your body feels like with certain triggers. I know that I used to be one that when I would get butterflies, and sometimes they come out of the clear blue, I would stop and need to ask, what's going on that these things are present? Like, what's going on that my stomach seems to be doing somersaults? Where is that coming from? And so then if I sit with it and try to figure out what's going on, then I can see sometimes I was missing something. Or sometimes something was coming up that I intellectually, like in my own thinking, wasn't aware of, but spirit was kind of sending me a sign and saying, hey, you got this coming up, or you've got to deal with such and such, or whatever that may be. I would feel the sensation in my body. Now, by bringing my attention and my awareness to it, I can then either deal with it so that I can like break it up, make it dissipate and blow away. But if I wasn't in that thing of asking, what is this? Why am I feeling this? If I wasn't in that mode of thinking, then that can continue to guide my actions. Or just sometimes people just start ignoring things, right? They ignore the very sensations that are present in their body, and without ever asking why, because it's so familiar to them. They get stuck on that. And then after a while, it seems like if you've been stuck on that for a while, you may actually become numb to it. So how do we avoid trivializing or, how do you avoid trivializing what the messages that your body is trying to send you, that is saying danger or tread lightly here or something? How do we then bring our attention back to it so that we can engage with it from a place of being empowered? Terrific Tuesday to you too, Ruth. How are you, dear? And so he's saying that the sensations can signal something for you. So every time you feel that, to then stop and say and ask yourself questions about what it is that you are feeling and why is this here. As soon as you become aware of it, he says, you have the power to break its trance. And he gives us some simple steps to do so. Number one, he says, recognize the familiar thoughts, images, and sensations inside of you. Do you have a thought or feeling or sensation when you're being judged, when somebody is looking down on you? And then here's the thing about that too. One of the things we don't do is we want to think that we change other people. Yeah, we can have some influence on them, but it is theirs to change. So if you are always feeling like you are in a space where you are constantly being judged, ask yourself questions about what it is that keeps you signing up for something that does not feel good in your body. I mean, that's just a question. What is it that is attracting us? Is it because it's familiar? Is it because we have been judged by our parents and that feeling is a familiar feeling, even though we don't like it? I mean, that's something to sit and think about, right? What is it about this person, this relationship, this situation? What is it about it that keeps me coming back for more? Well, I'm talking to myself. What is it? I mean, just out of curiosity, what is it that keeps you going back for more? Do they remind you of a parent or a relationship or, I mean, what is it? On a job, what does it bring for you? What are you playing out? What role? What is it? Step number two, you acknowledge that old fear has become activated, right? Ooh, feeling judged, ding, 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 here it is. Oh, now it's present, right? That's what he's saying. Bring it to mind. That old fear has been activated. Number three, take an action to unhinge from the spiraling feeling. So what does that mean for you? Does it mean that you push back on it? Does it mean that you remove yourself from the situation? And wonder if what you do is you recognize, oh, you know what? I am not being judged. I am judging myself. Because sometimes that's exactly what it is. Sometimes I will tell you, I notice people who create their own, if there is no drama, they will create their own drama. Because if we stand in resistance to something that may or may not be real, we create the drama and then decide that now that we've created the drama, we then have to dance in it. Let me give you a quick example of this. So I have this dog, right? And the dog really loves to sit on my lap as I drive. And I know that when I say no to her, that it is not something that she sits down and says, oh, okay, she said no. No, she's persistent. She pushes and she all of this friction around it. Now, sure enough, I can ignore her, or I can get mad and get activated by it. I can act as if there is this, like I got to show her who's boss, all of which create more stress for me and probably too for her. Now, her previous owner used to talk about this as if it was one of those things where she would get really mad about and anxious about because it was a battle between her and this dog. So I used to think, okay, it's easier for me just to let her sit on my lap. And it was. I didn't have a lot of resistance to it. I just let her do it, and I had no problems. However, now, fast forward, now I've got a second dog. And whatever the one dog does, now the other dog wants to do as well. So what happens is I'm driving down the street and I got two dogs battling for my lap. We see this played out in our families. We stand in resistance to something. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to wash another dish. I'm not going to cook another meal. I'm not going to sleep in the bed with you anymore. I'm not going to have sex with you anymore. There are all of these places where we set up resistance to things. And just because we are resisting them does not mean that they go away. What you resist persists. And so what we do is we get upset and mad and triggered about things that are already present. And the question becomes, how do we handle it? What do we do so that we are not standing or sitting in this constant space of activation, of anger, of angst about whatever it is? Sometimes I have discovered that it is so much easier for me to just let the dog sit on my lap, or it's so much easier for me to just go ahead and work the doing the laundry into my day, or it's easier just to comply than it is to resist, because the resistance takes me out of peace. And really what I'm trying to do is stay in peace. So what do I need to do in order to stay in peace? It is not making myself wrong and somebody else right. It is simply seeking for peace. So I'm still working it out as to what I do about two dogs on my lap as I drive. That's still, that's still a very a very tense situation. And some of you might say, don't let them go anywhere with you, right? Just leave them at home. But that is also problematic too. All of these things come with some type of way of so they all come with something. And so it is just asking yourself the questions: what do I need to do in order to maintain my level of peace? Is there something that I can do that keeps me at peace or in peace, rather than keeping me in this state of turn up, this state of friction? And that becomes part of the question. It becomes part of the quest to see what it is that you can do to be back at peace, to restore the equilibrium. And so some of these things work themselves out just through our being aware that I am feeling disturbed. I no longer want to be disturbed. How do I get to a place of peace? If it means doing the report even before it's requested, or if it means doing, doing something according to a different time schedule, how do I stay at peace? That's the real goal. Keep yourself at peace, not standing in resistance, not blocking, not yet, because that then keeps the friction present. It keeps the friction going. How do I get to a place of peace? Anyway, that's what I got for you today. It's a interesting, this whole thing is interesting as the thoughts are coming to me. I am going to get my little review together so that I can review some of the sections of this book and talk about them, and then close that out this week. Today is Tuesday, and if I suppose by Friday or Saturday, I can finish off all of this and close the book on this, then I can move on to, even if it is just me doing a beautiful stream of consciousness around some other topic, to close this out and then move on to something else. That will be amazing. So I thank you for being here today. Hey, Tracy. Tracy. Yeah. How do we not stand in resistance, Tracy? It's so funny. I was talking to I was talking to this friend of mine yesterday. Now he's Mr. Know-it-all, tells me that he knows this and knows that, which is like, you don't know half, right? Yeah, you don't know half. And people draw their own conclusions, and I find it hilarious. I know I started off thinking I'm gonna go down a certain path, and I was just thinking to myself, there's no short way to tell that story. So I'm gonna back up, because it's time for me to go. I'm gonna back up off of that, and maybe I'll deal with that sometime next week. I'll make a note to self talk about know-it-all, and and some of the assumptions that have been made. So it's interesting and hilarious. Who knows? We shall see. All right, thank you for being here. Blessings to each and every one of you. I hope you have a terrific Tuesday. Thank you. And with that, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. I love to say I got work to do. I feel blessed to have things that I work on and that I love to do. Feel so blessed, so blessed, so blessed. Yes. All right. So with that, I'm gone. Bye.